Hey, everybody, welcome back to the I Played 2 podcast. I'm your host, Rob Adler. This week, former Wingate University lacrosse player and current TV radio announcer Stefan Caray joins the show. Prior to going behind the mic, Stefan helped Wingate win a conference title in 2019. And then for 3 seasons beginning in 2022, he called games for the Amarillo Sod Poodles, the AA affiliate for the Arizona Diamondbacks. And now Stefan calls games on TV and radio for the St. Louis Cardinals. His great-grandfather, Harry Caray, spent a half-century calling baseball, the last 16 of which is the iconic TV voice of the Chicago Cubs. Also, Stefan's grandfather, Chip Caray, was the voice of the Atlanta Braves for over 3 decades. And currently, Stefan's father, Chip Caray, also calls games for the Cardinals, and has previously been a play-by-play man for the Braves, Cubs, and Mariners. And lastly, Stefan's twin brother, Chris Caray, calls games for the Athletics, and they called the Cardinals-A's game together earlier this season. Stefan, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Rob. I'm really excited, and you summed up the family tree very succinctly and very well, so thanks for the introduction.
No problem, man. Thanks for being here. How are things going for you today?
Things are going great. I'm really excited. You mentioned the Cubs. You mentioned Harry and his long history with St. Louis and Chicago. The Cubs are actually in town at Busch Stadium this weekend for the first time in 26, so everybody's really excited to see that go down. Really, really competitive division, so I'm looking forward to this, and then looking forward to heading over to the ballpark and seeing one of the best rivalries in baseball.
Speaking of one of the best rivalries, what's it like to be inside it right now with the Cardinals, and also with the family history with both your dad and your great-grandfather calling games for the Cubs?
Getting to hear the stories, it's really cool. Yesterday, my dad was doing a show with one of the local companies here in St. Louis about being on both sides of the rivalry and what it used to mean. Now, I think we're getting back to a place where these two teams are starting to be more contentious because these games really mean something, because this division is so competitive. And to get to be here in a year where the fans are starting to buy back in, the fans are recognizing, okay, it's starting to feel like the good old days, is really special for me. From a familial standpoint, the Cubs were great to my family. Obviously, Harry Caray rose to a different level of prominence with the Cubs than he did with the Cardinals, than he did with the A's and the White Sox. But I can't help but thank the St. Louis Cardinals, from my perspective, for what they've been able to do for me, and of course for our family. And bringing my dad aboard 4 years ago, it really has changed all of our lives.
I'm curious, have you ever heard any good stories about your great-grandfather or your grandfather and Bill Veeck? Because I know he was involved in both of their lives.
None that I can really pull from the top of my head, but I mean, Bill Veeck, I mean, what a pioneer he was. You look at his influence in St. Louis and the impact that he had on baseball in this region in general. There were great relationships for a long, long time, but most of the stories I hear about Harry actually have nothing to do with baseball, which is really something that speaks to who he was. He was the type of guy that people wanted to go and have a beer with. He was the common man personified over the microphone. And I think that's one of the cool things that I take away from all the things I learn about him, is just how much people connected with him as a man rather than just a play-by-play announcer.
Well, I never met him as a kid. I actually went out with Harry for Halloween one year in the mid-'80s.
Oh my goodness. Big old glasses, the holy cow. Were you able to drink at that point? Because if you weren't able to drink, I don't know if you could fully pull off the costume.
I was not able to drink, but being 12 at the time, probably drinking wouldn't be so good. But I will say, being in Dallas, I had to identify pretty much who he was to everybody because nobody had an idea of who he was.
Once he joined WGN and those games went national, then people started to know. Then the Saturday Night Live skits started coming out, and he sort of outgrew the role of just being a TV guy or a radio guy, which is impressive in its own right. But Harry was part of the game. He was central to a lot of those fans' lives. He was the one consistent part of all those teams, some really bad Cubs teams, some okay Cubs teams, but he's what made it fun for a lot of years for the fans that were tuning into those games.
So for you, when you hear those stories of him, your grandfather, your dad, did that influence you to want to get into broadcasting as well?
Not really, actually. I think it was one of those, well, what am I going to do now things. You talked about my lacrosse career, which is so cool because very few people ever bring that up. It's one of my favorite parts about my life, that chapter of getting good at a game that wasn't the most popular, where I grew up in Florida, sort of a niche sport, and falling in love with it, having sort of my own little spin in what is a baseball family, them getting to entertain something that wasn't just throwing strikes and hitting the ball around a diamond. I wanted to do something involved in the sport. I didn't know if it was going to be coaching. I think all of us dream of being professional athletes, but I realized pretty quickly that wasn't going to be in the cards for me. So when it came down to me making a decision to continue my lacrosse career or start going a different direction, the only career that I'd ever really been around or ever really known was broadcasting. So it was one of those things. It was like, okay, well, I guess I'll do this too. And things have worked out really well. I've had a great support system. I've had so many amazing mentors in my life that have helped me to get to the place that I am, including my brother, who's just 17 minutes older than me. But in the broadcast space, it feels like he's decades older than me with all the work that he's put in to get to where he is. I'm just really lucky. And there's certainly a level of influence, I think, just being around it as much as I have been. But there was never a direct, hey, you need to do this from my dad, or hey, you need to do this from my grandpa. And I didn't know Harry. Harry passed away before I was born. It just was something that found me naturally, and I'm really glad that it did.
You mentioned your brother, and I know you guys called a game together earlier this season. What was it like to be in the booth with him to call a game at the major league level? I know you had done it at other levels before, but the major leagues is the top spot you can be at.
It was everything. I think it was one of those things that we always dreamed about. And the question always pops up, did you ever imagine this happening, you and your brother calling a game together? And I think my answer surprises people. My answer is yes. I did imagine that that would happen. I didn't think it would happen this soon into our careers, but the nuance of having identical twin broadcasters, two brothers calling play by play, working for different teams, and then able to share a booth together. I just credit the A's for thinking outside the box and allowing us to do that. It's one of those moments in our life that we'll never forget. And oftentimes when you're making a memory, you don't realize how profound that memory is until years and years and years later. We got to sit in the moment and say, wow, this is something we will remember for the rest of our lives. It's not this mundane, trivial event that we'll forget bits and pieces of. We will remember it with full clarity decades down the road. And I think getting to put our own spin on it, because all the surroundings of who we are because of our last name, it's nice to have our own little spin on it, being the first twin brothers to ever call a game together. And I think the first TV play-by-play brothers to ever call a game together. It's surreal. So we got to do that, and it wouldn't have happened without the great people of the Athletics and the Cardinals for allowing us to do it.
I watched a few innings of that game, and one of the things I kind of liked was how you and your brother kind of bounced, where one was play-by-play, the other one was sort of the analyst with Dallas Braden as well. And I loved the chemistry of, in one inning, one of you was going to take the lead, and another inning, the other one did.
I just have to give a lot of credit to the people behind the scenes of the Athletics broadcast. Delaire Lewis, the director-producer. It's not an easy job balancing two play-by-play guys and an analyst that wasn't even in the booth. So Dallas was down in the dugout, and we weren't able to look at him and see his mouth start to move and pause and hold back. So for Dallas to be as much of a pro as he was, and for us not to trip all over each other, it's a testament to the great work of Delaire, of Dallas, all the people behind the scenes, and of course to my brother, who was really the maestro of the whole thing, telling me when to pause because he knew when Dallas was about to make a point, and making sure that the broadcast ran smoothly, because there were a lot of times where I was about to talk where he put his palm up and I just had to pause, because they have that relationship. And I think we put on a good show for 3 days, and we were really lucky to get to do that.
It's almost like you've hit Mount Everest of your career and you're not even 30, and it's like, where do you go from here?
It is really crazy to think about. I've gotten to do a couple of innings with my dad when I made my major league debut last year. I've gotten to do a series with my brother. I'm actually really looking forward to doing a series without a blood relative in the booth with me. That's going to be really exciting to get to kind of do things on my own. But I think the next frontier for me will be my brother, my dad, and I all doing a pregame spot or doing an inning or something together, because the technology is there. But the one I'm really looking forward to more than that is when my 17-year-old little brother Tristan gets into this crazy business, because he's going to be better than all of us. He's already started. He started earlier than my dad did. He started earlier than my brother did, and certainly started earlier than I did. So once he gets into the fold, getting to do it with him is going to be better than even getting to do that with Chris. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm hopeful that it'll all happen, but he's going to be really good, and we're lucky to have the support system that we do.
Because I know your grandfather and your dad did this at the beginning of their career, has there been any thought of maybe not calling baseball, calling basketball or another sport?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just a matter of opportunity. At the University of Georgia, where I studied following my time playing lacrosse at Wingate, there were so many contractual obligations to all the major sports. So students couldn't go and call basketball or couldn't go and call football. You had to go and make your own way, which is why Chris and a buddy of ours, Jack Sadegan, created this little radio network thing that we were doing at Georgia. We brought a couple of close friends and talented young broadcasters over to do games at Gwinnett College at the NAIA baseball level, which was fun. That was really where I learned how to call the game. So during that period, it was very difficult trying to do football or do other sports because our professors at the journalism school would go down with a spreadsheet that would say, hey, here are all the dates of the games that you can do. And there was play-by-play slot and an analyst slot and a reporter slot. And it was not based on merit. Now, I think that the University of Georgia has done a tremendous job, but this was always one thing that differed between Georgia and Syracuse was they put out this spreadsheet, and the first person that would get to the spreadsheet would just fill out all the play-by-play spots. So you were done. There was no chance unless you were the first one to get to it. So it was hard, but I would love to do football in particular. I'm a big college football guy, big University of Georgia guy. Growing up in the South, football is a big king sport. And I did get the chance to do some lacrosse for a Division II team in my hometown of St. Augustine, Florida, for the Flagler College Saints. So that was a lot of fun. Definitely an adjustment from being a player and a coach now to broadcasting it. But to answer your question a roundabout way, yeah, I'd love to do other sports. Baseball is certainly my home and where I want to be the most, but there's no rule that says you can't go do other things.
Have you always been a Georgia fan before you went there, or did you root for another school in the SEC?
Interesting you say that. My dad is a Georgia grad. He graduated from UGA in 1987. My mom, for a few years, was actually a cheerleader at Clemson University. So I kind of rooted for both. I was definitely more of a Georgia guy. And a lot of that was stoked by being a Georgia fan in the state of Florida in my elementary school years, which would have been 2005 to 2012, when Florida won 2 national championships and were a dominant force in the SEC East. I was just abused by kids. Oh, you're a Georgia fan? We're Gators. So that hate fire for the University of Florida just sat deep in my belly as a child, and it made it a lot easier to root for Georgia over everybody else.
You must have gotten sick of hearing about Tim Tebow.
I did, but I think Tim Tebow is a tremendous human being. He's so easy to root for. And when he got to the NFL, there was really no animosity. I've rooted for a lot of Gators that have gone to the league. It's not really like one of those things where I just will never root for them because I have respect for them. They haven't been nearly as good as they used to be, but I still have respect for the program. I still really enjoy the tradition. Going to the Swamp is one of the best atmospheres in college football. And it's a lot more fun when the Gators are good because it means our rivalry means a whole lot more.
Yeah, and I'll second you on Tebow as well. I interviewed Tebow when he was at the high school All-American game a couple of different times, and he was as nice can be and as genuine and as friendly, as gracious as a high school senior can be.
You want to hear a quick little funny Tim Tebow story? The only high school that Tim Tebow did not beat on his schedule during his, I think, 4-year career at Allen Dean East High School, my high school, St. Augustine High School, the Yellow Jackets. So I can hold that over his head if I ever see him. But he was a tremendous talent and still continues to make waves in all the best ways in society. So credit to him. Tip my cap to Tim Tebow. I'm sure it would have been great to have him, but we had a guy named Matthew Stafford. So there's a decent trade-off there.
Stafford was a good person, too. He was a fun guy to interview, as laid back as a person could be. He was at a quarterback camp. When quarterbacks are around quarterbacks, they tend to be very competitive, and he was as laid back and as easygoing as one could get.
It's that Texas cool mentality, kind of like Clayton Kershaw, the baseball teammates, football teammates. It's nice to come around these titans of sport these guys that are making tens of millions of dollars a year and they're still good human beings and upstanding citizens. It's just as a reminder that you can throw a ball, you can catch a ball, you can hit a ball, you can score a puck. All that matters at the end of the day, are you a good person? Because that's something that I will always value over your ability on a field.
You've grown up in sports. Who is somebody that you met along the way that you still look back on and feel like you're in awe of?
So I was out one night in Athens, Georgia. This was right in the middle of COVID. So there were a couple of bars that would be open, and I had had a few drinks, and we end up at this place called Polly's. Polly's was like a wine bar in Athens. And so I ended up there with some friends and a couple of girls in one of our favorite sororities. And I look over and it's Stetson Bennett. This was before he became the starting quarterback. And Stetson was there with a date, may have been 2 dates. That dude's a stud. But he looks over and he says, "Are you guys twins?" And I started fanboying. And this is me growing up in professional baseball, being around these athletes all the time. And Stetson was still the backup third string quarterback. But it was so cool because you never saw University of Georgia football players out ever. The entire time I was at Georgia, I saw two. I saw Stetson Bennett and I saw Jordan Davis. Those are the only two I ever saw out. But it was amazing. And as a lacrosse player, I was introduced to Casey Powell at a young age. Casey Powell is one of the greatest players ever to pick up a stick. He couldn't have been cooler. But those are the two that come to mind immediately. There are a lot of baseball guys that certainly were people that I enjoyed being around, but there was always the rule: you're not a fan. They work with your dad, so don't fanboy, don't ask for autographs. So I think that was something I always recognized, and it surprised me when I met Stetson Bennett. That was the moment it came out more than anything.
You mentioned your love of lacrosse. How did your love of lacrosse initially start?
When I was growing up, I went to a private school in Orlando, Florida called Lake Highland Preparatory School. Now, in the state of Florida, obviously, it's becoming more of a lacrosse hotbed than it used to be with the Northerners moving down. But when I was in middle school and late in elementary school, Lake Highland and St. Andrews would play in the state championship every single year. So they would pause class. Like if the game was on during class, they would stop class and we would all watch the lacrosse games. So when I was in those years, my friends were all starting to play lacrosse. They were all picking up a stick. I started playing in like 7th grade, which is really late for Northerners, but it's really early for a lot of Florida kids. And all the while, when my parents would go out of town, we had a babysitter, and her fiance was one of the best players in the state of Florida, had his number retired at Lake Brantley High School, played club ball at the University of Florida, and then was the assistant coach at Lake Mary High School. He got a stick in my hands, and I fell in love with it from that point on. I've never been so dedicated to something in my entire life as I was to lacrosse. I just loved hitting the wall, loved going and watching highlights of guys like Mark Matthews at the University of Denver, just seeing the games on Saturdays, going to sports bars and hoping they had ESPNU so that I could see lacrosse. But it's something that I will always be in love with. It's the most beautiful game that's ever existed. And that's coming from a baseball guy through and through. I'm just really happy that that period of my life happened and that I can continue to give back to the game that gave so much to me when I coached my old high school team during the off season.
Can you describe the physicality of lacrosse? Because I think people who aren't as familiar with it don't realize just how much players come into contact with each other, and the stick work maybe while the officials aren't looking that you can get away with.
Absolutely, especially in the indoor game, right? In Canada up north where they play box lacrosse, that is, to me, the best form of lacrosse there is. It's 5-on-5, it's fast-paced, there's rapid goal scoring. It's a lot like hockey, but with more scoring. I would say as a guy who played attack, I played offense, you are getting abused with the stick. And you just have to know if it's below the neck, it's fair game. You are getting hit with a carbon fiber shaft of a 6-foot pole where somebody's doing a full windup. But the thing is, you don't really feel it when you're running. You're just playing the game. Defenders will know the soft spots. They'll know on the arm guard where the spot of the wrist is exposed. So they'll try and hit there. They'll try to get in on your hands. And at the college level, it just gets even faster. You've got to get the ball out of your stick quickly. You've got to make a shot when your hands get free because a slide's going to come to you and they're going to hit you right in the chest to try to put you on your butt. It's a great game. It's a physical game, but boy, is it so much fun. And I can't say enough for kids who are thinking of a spring sport, if they're a football player in the fall, or they're just looking for something that's different and fun and captures all the excitement of soccer, football, go play lacrosse, go give it a try. It is really a tremendous game.
You mentioned box lacrosse. I actually had somebody on my show a couple of years ago named Wayne Primo. His brother Keith played for the Flyers. He was actually a great box lacrosse player, and he had to make the decision between box lacrosse or ice hockey. And he went, where am I going to make more money at the pro game? And that's why he chose ice hockey. And the other thing, too, about box lacrosse, the greatest indoor player is a guy named John Tavares, who's the uncle of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Well, I believe he was a Buffalo Bandit for a really long time. They call it Bandit Land in Buffalo. Look, lacrosse is still a growing sport, but you go to a game in Buffalo, it's packed to the gills. It's like an NBA game, and the people are into it. I wish it had more mainstream coverage because it's certainly due for more mainstream coverage. I think ESPN picked up the NLL, at least for ESPN Plus, so they're airing their games. And then the PLL, which is the outdoor game, has certainly boomed since Paul Rabel and his brother decided we're going to have a player-led league. It's been really fun to watch the game grow. It's fun watching the national championship on Memorial Day weekend every single year. But I don't follow it nearly as much as I used to, given that it's in the middle of baseball season. But it is truly a fantastic sport.
To give you a little bit of a fact that I don't know if you know, but in 2019, when you guys faced Queens had a player named Alex Alonso, whose brother is
Pete Alonso. I played club ball with Alex. Alex is a Tampa kid. I grew up across the state in St. Augustine. So we played in a tournament together, I believe, with Lacrosse Club of Orlando. So I'm very well aware of Alex Alonso, and he was close with my roommate, Alex Cordero, who's from Valrico, Florida, right outside of Tampa. Alex was our starting goalie and one of my best friends in the world. You know your stuff, man. You know your history.
I had Alex on my show last year, actually. Alex is a great guy. And you want to talk about somebody who's intense?
Oh, no doubt. He's like a freight train running down the middle of the field. I mean, he's built like Pete, probably a little bit faster than Pete. So imagine that running at you, full head of steam downhill, trying to stop it, and a cannon of a shot that is probably pushing triple digits. We had such an intense rivalry with Queens, beautiful school. The funny part about it is they ended up going Division I a few years later, and our grad assistant at Wingate ended up becoming the head coach at Queens. He's still there now, Nick Kolpitz, and he ended up hiring one of his bosses, the offensive coordinator at Wingate, to be his offensive coordinator at Queens. So it really is a what goes around comes around situation. But I really remember my time fondly at Wingate and still harbor a little bit of resentment for Queens because you know how deep those rivalries go.
For you, what was the recruiting process like for you? Because lacrosse doesn't have as many options as, say, football or basketball.
There were a lot of different moments in my process. I started going to tournaments after my freshman year up north, Gettysburg, Battle of the Hotbeds in Delaware, Trilogy Gate Cup, did some stuff in Baltimore, a lot of showcase events. And that's a credit to my mom, who spared no expense of time being able to drive me up to the Mid-Atlantic and enjoy those tournaments. And I had some other teammates when I transferred to St. Augustine going into my junior year that were going up to those as well. And sometimes we'd carpool and make a trip out of it. But I didn't really get a whole lot of looks until my senior year. And I was one of those guys that was a solid D2 recruit. I was committed to Rollins College right outside where I grew up in Winter Park, Florida. And then I decommitted to end up going to Wingate. I had conversations with Lenore Ryan and Limestone and Belmont Abbey, which at the time were three of the best schools in college lacrosse, Limestone being like the perennial national champions. And I did fly out to Utah per Scott Ratliff's request. Scott Ratliff was a long stick midfielder in the MLL and the PLL, arguably one of the greatest LSMs to ever play the game. And he got me in contact with Brian Holman, who was taking over the brand new Utah program. I look back on this story with fondness, but when I was in the moment, it was heartbreaking. Went out to Utah and did a showcase. I had all the recommendations and thought I played pretty well. After the tournament, I go up to Brian Holman and, He says, "So you're the Florida kid that Scott keeps telling me all about." And I said, "Thanks so much for having me." He's like, "Thanks so much for coming. Look, I'm going to cut to the chase. You're not good enough to play here." I was like, "Okay, all right." And my mom was standing right there and she went into defense mode. And it was really a humbling experience. But he was right. I really enjoyed playing Division II. That was the right level for me. And even then, I didn't want to continue playing after my year and a half at Wingate. So I moved on to Georgia, played some club ball, and then I let that competitive part of my life go by the wayside and start focusing on the broadcasting thing. But lacrosse was such a huge gift that I've been given in this life, and I'm really, really grateful for it.
So, how did you make the transition from lacrosse to getting your first job behind the mic?
I was lucky that my brother went to Georgia a semester before me. So he went to a small school in South Georgia because it's tough to get into Georgia now. And we had great grades, pretty decent SAT, ACT scores, but it's hard to get into. So my brother getting there a semester before me was nice because it gave me an easy landing rather than having to meet all new people. A lot of my credits didn't transfer. So trying to focus on who I should meet, how I should get started. My brother had already been there and had gotten to know the way things worked at UGA. So when he did that, we started doing games on this little Focusrite box and using a Mixler subscription, just calling games wherever we could, whether it was non-conference women's basketball, and we had to talk to the SID to make sure that they were okay with it, even though nobody was going to be listening to our broadcast over ESPN Plus. Or like the big one was doing the stream on GGC with Matt Mahoney and his great crew over there. I thank them so much for the early part of my career. That's how we got started. And then my junior year going into my senior year, we had some help from Scott Strickland, the head baseball coach at UGA, who had heard our work and obviously knew who our dad was. And he said, "Look, I want to reach out on your behalf. I do this for the players that I think are really good and can make an impact to the Cape Cod Collegiate Baseball League." And that's where things really started to blow up for us. We had interviews with all 10 teams. About 6 of them offered us to come work for them. And we got to work for essentially the New York Yankees of the Cape Cod Baseball League, the 17-time champion Katuitt Kettleers. And that was a summer I'll never forget. Our grandparents came up with us, my mom, my little brother. We got to do baseball every single day. And it gave us a little taste, an appetizer of what working in the minor leagues would be like, how it was an everyday grind. And we so enjoyed it. And then from there, you've probably read the story. We ended up at the World Series with the Braves in 2021. Somebody recognized my mom. That somebody just so happened to be Tony Enzer. My mom started pitching us immediately about working in the minor leagues. He thought it was going to be probably a year ago instead of when it was a year ago, meaning he thought about us being an option at 24 or 25. Well, our predecessor, Sam Levitt, left for the San Diego Padres. I get a call in the middle of a music appreciation class that I was taking as an elective. And I said, "I've got to leave." And my teacher said, "What's it about?" I said, "I think somebody's going to hire me for a job." She said, "Okay, what are you doing here then? Go." Get on the FaceTime. 12 days later, I'm in Amarillo, Texas, and calling professional baseball. So it was a whirlwind. It was a really fast turnaround. But that's sometimes how these things work.
So, how were you able to get to Amarillo 12 days later? Because picking up your life and moving halfway across the country isn't exactly an easy thing to do in that short amount of time.
And all of the credits that I still had to finish. I mean, I didn't finish my college degree until last summer because all the classes that I needed were offered during the baseball season. So there weren't enough hours in the day to be able to pull that off. Fortunately, I was able to do that this past year, and I'm glad to be a proud graduate of the University of Georgia. But it wasn't easy. I'm not going to lie to you. There certainly was some pushback from people at UGA, which was not ideal. I can understand where they were coming from. Our argument was the whole point of going to college is to get people out there in the workforce and working toward their goal and their dreams. So are you really going to say that you don't want two 22-year-olds to be lead AA baseball broadcasters? That doesn't happen all that much. That's a feather in your cap as much as it is a feather in mine. And finally, after we talked about it, they let us go, which was nice. So we ended up there, and it was really a great time in my life. Amarillo, it was a different place. It was a bit of culture shock, but I've met some of the greatest people I've ever met in my life in Amarillo, and they gave us our start. There's no amount of words that I can say to thank each and every person in the 806 for that.
I know what a standard poodle is, and I know what a tiny poodle is. What the heck is a sod poodle?
A sod poodle is a prairie dog, and that is the colloquial term for a prairie dog in that region. They also had a couple more local alternate identities. They have the pigweeds, which came the year after I left. Pigweeds are like a tumbleweed, and the calf fries. Do you know what a calf fry is?
I think so, but I'm going to let you take this.
A calf fry is the West Texas version of a Rocky Mountain oyster. For those who do not know what a Rocky Mountain oyster is, it is a fried calf's testicle. And so that was the name of the team. They wore it in this burnt orange, almost University of Texas color on Friday nights. And it was great. The fans absolutely loved it. The debut of the calf fries, Tony brings calf fries in, and I wouldn't say I'm the most adventurous eater in the world as it is. He brings them in and says, "Oh yeah, you got to try them on air." And we're trying them. Weirdly enough, not the worst thing I've ever tasted in terms of flavor. It really did taste like fried chicken. I think people say that enough about if you fry something enough, it just tastes like fried chicken. It was more of a texture thing. It was chewy. And that was where you were like, okay, yeah, one of these is enough. But it was really, really a lot of fun. And they do such a great job over there. And my dear friend, Eric Bach, is now the play-by-play broadcaster over there. And my friend and partner, Zach Goodman, got the Colorado Rockies radio job going into this year, which was his dream job anyway. So they've done a nice job of being able to find talent and push them on to the next level. And that doesn't happen without a good mind like Tony Enzer thinking outside the box and bringing people in that maybe other teams wouldn't.
I forget the name of the place in Amarillo, but I know that they cut off the tie. Do you have a tie of yours hanging there?
I do not. I did go to the Cadillac Ranch. My dad did draw inappropriate drawings on the Cadillacs in spray paint and then sent pictures of them over to his partner, Jeff Francoeur, because they're both 15 in the mind. But it really is an interesting place. You have Route 66 right there. One of my favorite burgers that I've ever eaten is right on Route 66 at a place called the Golden Light Cafe. The Big Texan Steak Ranch, the 72-ounce steak challenge, we got to watch that live and in the flesh the first night I was there. And that was when I realized, oh, wait, this is what West Texas is all about, from the decor to the yeehaw to the belt buckles and the boots to throw it all together. It's a great place. And there really is no place like Amarillo that I've ever been to and probably ever will be to again in my life.
You can't say Amarillo on this, but when you've traveled around the minor leagues, where was your favorite place to call a game?
Tulsa, Oklahoma, without hesitation. It was, to me, the crown jewel of the Texas League. The ballpark was beautiful. The hotel was fantastic. One of the most underrated cities that I've ever been to. Because what people don't remember about Tulsa is Tulsa used to be Dallas before Dallas was Dallas. That was where the Osage found oil, and it became this huge, booming oil town in the early 1900s. And you have all the history with Black Wall Street and the Dodgers affiliate, the beautiful ballpark. The ownership was great to us. The vantage point was great. It was the closest I'd felt to being in the big leagues before getting to the big leagues. That was how I felt about Tulsa, Oklahoma, and a sneaky good food town as well. Springfield would be the other. I loved the Cardinal baseball tradition. When you are my age and in baseball and you don't want to eat ballpark hot dogs every single day, access to food and food near the hotel is a huge, huge key. And so Springfield had one of these old time steak and shakes, and I love steak and shake. So we would walk across the street there probably 4 times in a 6-game series and just go eat our hearts out, then waddle back to the hotel with the meat sweats. It was great. So those two are my favorite places to call a game in the minors.
Could talk food all day, so I'm going to ask you, since I can tell you're a burger guy, where is your favorite place to have a burger anywhere in the U.S.?
Wow. Okay, so the best burger I've ever had, and before they shut it down and reopened it, was Tavern on Rush in Chicago. That was the best burger I've ever had. But like I said, Golden Light Cafe is up there, mostly because they bring you a huge burger. It's super cost effective. It's really good flavor. And they bring you these sides of fries that make Five Guys portions look like a kid's meal. It's insane how much they bring you. When it's a large fry, and I'm a big guy, I'm tall. I like to eat. When they bring you a large fry, it can feed 6 people that have an appetite. So we were really big fans of theirs. I like burgers, but I wouldn't say I order them all the time now. But Tavern on Rush and Golden Light, I think, are the two that pop into my head.
Well, if you ever swing through Dallas, it's not that close to the ballpark, but I got a burger place here that I will put up against both of those. It's called Edmonds. It's in Plano. It's a mom and pop place. You can't even see it from the road, and it is the best burger I've had here in town. And I've had a lot of burgers in Dallas.
That's the type of place I'm looking for.
I know you've traveled all around the country for baseball and lacrosse, but away from sports in general, growing up, was there a trip or anything that you took with your family that you look back on fondly?
Oh, yeah, there were lots of trips. I mean, I was really fortunate to get to travel, and my mom is the huge traveler of all of us. As a kid, we took a Christmas trip to Europe, and we did the Mediterranean on a cruise. Barcelona, we got to do Rome, Naples, Florence. That one I look back on as almost a regret because I was young. I was probably 9 or 10, so I didn't get to really appreciate all of it for what Europe is. I'd love to go back. And really, every trip as a teenager to Chicago, going to Wrigley Field, being in Chicago during the World Series run, but not necessarily at the games, getting to see that and see what it meant to that town, I will carry that with me for the rest of my life. But those are two that really stand out for me.
Talking about that 2016 World Series run, can you talk about just what the city was like and how abuzz it was?
It was just controlled chaos and maybe not even controlled. I walked into the NLCS and there was just a different environment, unlike anything I've ever been around in baseball. Wrigley during the postseason, it's tough to beat. Now, I don't want to give too much love to the Cubs because they're coming into town against our beloved Redbirds, but it was different. And being at Harry Caray's restaurant the night that they won it and seeing people go absolutely crazy and random strangers kissing each other on the lips and random dudes bear hugging each other and people saying, I'll buy a round of drinks for this whole bar. The weight that was off of everyone's shoulders for the curse being lifted. It was really special, and it was baseball in its finest form. Getting to see that and watching my dad get to be a part of that, it was great. And then a few years later, the Braves won it. So we got to experience it as true fans, and there's nothing like winning a World Series because it is one of the hardest things to do in sports. I would put it up against pretty much any other sport of how difficult it is to pull off.
Looking ahead, where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Hopefully, I have a great family outside of the ones that raised me and I grew up with. Wife and kids would be not bad. Hopefully, I can afford a house, but it's tough for people my generation right now. I'd love to be a lead TV guy somewhere, like my dad and like my brother is working toward. I have confidence that that'll happen if I keep going about things the right way. But just continuing to love the game of baseball. And my dad, hopefully he won't be needing sponge baths or anything at that point because he's doing really well for 61. But I'm looking forward to it. I don't want to wish my time away because these young years in your career, my dad talks about them all the time as what he learned and all the things he remembers. I don't want to wish my life away. I'm just really lucky to be in the position that I'm in and counting my blessings every single day.
Because you're a young guy and probably going to be a few young folks listening to this, what advice do you have for them about getting into the broadcasting field?
I think a lot of times people are shy to ask me about things because there's an assumption that I just got my role because of who my dad is and who my grandpa is, my great grandpa. And sure, that played a hand in it. You're going to get some extra looks because of what your last name is, but you've got to go out and perform. And do you know any lawyers?
I do. My cousin's one.
Was your cousin's dad a lawyer?
No.
Well, in a lot of cases, somebody's a lawyer because their dad's a lawyer, or somebody's a doctor because their dad's a doctor. All this to say, the only thing you can control is who you are. And it all ties in be authentic. If you're a young broadcaster, be authentic. If you grew up listening to Chip Caray, don't try to be Chip Caray 2.0. try to be yourself. Try to be something different, because the world doesn't need another Stefan Caray, even if they have one in Sacramento, California right now. The world doesn't need another Harry Caray. They need new blood. They need somebody that's exciting. I've come across so many broadcasters that they listen to John Miller and they try to be exactly like John Miller, or Vin Scully, or Pat Hughes. And those are all phenomenal announcers, but they got to where they are by being themselves. So be authentic, be yourself, and be the same person off air as you are on air, because people can smell BS from a mile away. So it's really not that hard to do. Just go and have a great time, enjoy the game, be a fan, and sell the drama. But it's a great career path. And if anybody ever needs any help with it, don't be a stranger to reach out to me on Instagram or Twitter or LinkedIn, as we've talked, and I would be more than happy to help.
Stefan, I want to thank you so much for taking time out to join the I Play 2 podcast today, especially on a game day. Love to hear about your family, your time in baseball, your passion for lacrosse. Take care, man, and have a great rest of the season.
Thanks so much, Rob. Really appreciate you having me, and I'd love to come on again soon. So best of luck moving forward.